Frontline workers keep our world moving. They work in high-stakes, fast-changing environments where technology can empower them or hold them back. And when adoption fails, the impact ripples outward, slowing teams, frustrating customers, and undermining the success of the entire organization. This is Frontline Innovators, and I'm your host, Justin Lake. In each episode, I speak with leaders who are rethinking how technology is introduced, embraced, and sustained on the front line. Leaders putting people at the heart of digital transformation. Frontline Innovators is brought to you by Skillful. We help organizations achieve lasting technology adoption for frontline teams so they can work smarter, safer, and with confidence in the tools they use every day. Okay, welcome to Frontline Innovators Podcast. I'm your host, Justin Lake, and we have another great episode lined up for today that has taken a long time for us to secure this guest, but I'm super excited about the conversation we're about to have. Today's guest serves as Senior Vice President of Enterprise Systems and Business Optimization at Decision Point Technologies. She's an enterprise transformation executive focused on aligning operating models, integrating systems, and accelerating performance. With over 2 decades of experience leading M&A integrations, system overhauls, and large-scale operational change, she brings practical insights for leaders navigating complexity and driving scalable growth. Please welcome Keri Corbin. Hello, Keri.
Hi, Justin. How you doing? This has been a while. We've been trying.
It has been a while. We've been trying for a while to get this done, and I'm glad we're finally here.
Me too.
You and I just have appreciated you since the first time that we were introduced. You have been steeped in the business of serving the women and men on the front lines for your entire career. You've done so from a few different angles, and I just am so excited to be able to explore those different angles and kind of see the different comparisons and contrasts that you can pull out from that. So with that said, let me go into the first question that we start every show with, which is, what is the biggest operational consequence of poor frontline technology adoption? How does that impact the business?
Yeah, I mean, it's such a good question. We could probably spend our whole time together going over the 2 or 3 points there. I mean, the number one impact, let's leave, aside the end user impact just for a moment. The number one impact is, at the end of the day, your customer's experience is really the number one impact. And when you walk customer experience back, it all comes back to your customer's experience is your salesperson experience, is your revenue experience, right? So when you're talking about how your company is performing, not paying attention to how your end users are able to perform their job on a day-to-day basis, you're talking productivity losses, you're talking an inability to get product out, an inability to meet the expectations of your end customers. And I talk a lot about it's your customer's customer that's impacted by that. And that walks all the way back to the bottom line of the company. So not paying attention to the people who are doing the work every day really affects the bottom line and the ability to hit revenue and expense targets for the company.
Let's talk about that for a little bit, because you and I touched on this briefly before we pressed the record button, but I want to explore that a little bit more, because I think one thing that we seem to all struggle with, I feel like those of us that are close to frontline operations feel the impact more directly. But oftentimes the challenge for us is that we have to communicate the reasons why in the business case to people who may not be as close. And so some of the things that you said when you talk about customer experience, okay, of course we want better customer experience, but what does bad customer experience cost us, right? Like, how do we make a business case? How do we take these topics and make them more measurable so that we can communicate to someone who may be a little bit ice cold and maybe have a perception that they don't care that much? I know that's not really true, but they're making decisions from a different perspective. How do we make that case?
Yeah, and it's probably easier now than it was 10 years ago when everybody didn't have a device in their hands. It's a bit easier for me to say now. I'll give a general example. I was trying to skip a month of a subscription the other day. That can be a very daunting experience with some apps that you use, you go on and you're trying to figure out how to skip a month. That can be a very easy experience. If I were to have said that to you 10 years ago, you would be like, what is she talking about? You got to call a phone number, you got to get a person, you got to give them 5 reasons why you have to do this. It's much easier for me just to not skip it. But I can now come to you, maybe as the CFO of the company, and say, if we spend $10,000, have a developer build this thing, and it makes it easier for my customer's customer to log into the app, click a button and say, skip this month. And I'm skipping because I have too much of the product. I didn't use it last month, whatever the reason is. And I'm not going to give them a hard time, and I'm going to make it really easy for them to do that. I'm now driving customer loyalty. Because you have that own experience at home, it's much easier for you to connect those dots so that the technology gap has closed. It makes it easier for people like me to go ask and say to them, my team in the warehouse is struggling with this thing because we didn't build it right the first time. And to rebuild that, these are the steps that we need to remove. These are the tensions and the pain points that they're having. And I can take an example that somebody's experiencing in their own life, and it's easier for me to apply that today.
Yeah, I think you made one of the positive cases for where the consumerization of IT actually helps in
Yeah,
some ways, right? I think there are always pros and cons to situations like that, but we are all kind of expert IT users in our personal lives. And so it shapes our expectations about how things should work in the enterprise.
right.
And, frankly, the business you're in today, the business I'm in today is partly because we're trying to close the gap between the customer experiences that we've become accustomed to with the Netflixes and Amazons of the world and stuff like that, right? And we're trying to provide a reasonably similar experience for our enterprise workers, and that's easier said than done, right?
Right. Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, there is the goods and bads of it, right? So, I mean, I remember when we first rolled out kind of the touch screens to the warehouse, and we were like, this is going to be great. Everybody's going to love it. It's going to be wonderful. We rolled them out, and the end users are like, why would we want to use these in a warehouse? This is
Yes.
horrible. That
Yes.
was my very first experience in, we forgot to ask the end users if they thought this was going to be great.
Right.
It was my first example of a warehouse manager literally calling saying, why did you do this to us? And I was like,
What?
we picked you. You were the first site. I thought you were going to love me for this. And it was so enlightening. It was kind of the start of the journey down this path I've taken sense of like, you got to talk to these people first before you make this assumption that it's going to be great.
So I think it's actually important. Most people I have on the show either are on the customer side, meaning that they work for an enterprise that is, serving in some operational capacity,
Yep.
or they work on the vendor side. And like my company, where we are serving companies in these large operations, you have such a unique vantage point because you've done both.
I
You've been
have.
on the customer side, and now you're sitting on the kind of provider side. So I would love it if you could just take a few minutes to just explain a bit about your background previously on, I'll say, the consumer side of things, and then now on the solution provider side, because you just alluded to a story that I think was from one, and it may not make sense to transfer over. So share that with us.
Yeah, for sure. So I spent, prior to my role now, I spent about 8 years at DHL Supply Chain. So in the service management group, my team did infrastructure project management. So the kind of implementation and stand up of all the technology inside of warehouses. So service management, all the handheld devices and technology. So, as I moved into that role initially, and I came from the customer side, but I came from kind of servers and big refresh type work before I went to DHL. As I moved into that role, I didn't understand the complexity of it. I didn't understand the complexity of supply chain. And once you learn it, you kind of get sucked in it and you never get out. It's this weird thing where it starts to become really cool. But when you develop this relationship with people and they call you like, couldn't we put a tablet here? Or that was one of the kind of the first conversations I had with systems resources in the warehouse. They were like, why can't we use tablets? And initially we were like, what do you need tablets for? You have vehicle mounted devices and you have this. But once you start having these really interesting conversations, you start to realize like, I'm telling these people what technology to use, but I'm not there every day. And so I started to kind of watch the people not standing inside doing the work, telling the people doing the work what they were supposed to be doing. I could go hours about some use cases around like vision that I saw when that first rolled out, and kind of backing teams into using kind of voice pick and vision picking, that it was just like the teams were like, what are you guys doing to us and our productivity numbers? And so I found a lot of success with spending a ton of time in the warehouse, working with our partners, which that's the side I sit on now,
Right.
taking the partners in, having business reviews, really listening to the teams, um, and building out solutions based on what the frontline workers were providing us as far as feedback. And then about 8 years ago, I moved over to what is now Decision Point Technologies, which is where I work today. And I started using that knowledge of the customers to go out with our sales team and build products and solutions for our customers. So taking the same information that I learned from our users and going out and asking questions. And so we started, and I think, Justin, this is where you and I started to connect, was we weren't going out to sell a widget or a piece of hardware. We were going out to talk to customers about what are the top 5 things that are causing you pain? Where are you seeing inefficiencies and pinch points? Where could you be more efficient if we gave you a whiteboard and said build a perfect workflow for your
Mm-hmm.
team? Where are you seeing slowness? A lot of it is around training and ability to get somebody up to speed quickly. And my move really happened about the time Android had rolled out, and DHL was an early adopter of that, but about the time that everyone's like, oh, we actually have to do this. And so when I moved over, it was really starting to talk to teams about, this isn't a form factor change. It's actually a big change in your ability to do more inside the 4 walls of a warehouse or in a retail store with these devices. And you can start using them for more kind of productivity measurements. And so starting to work on building solutions and wrapping services and apps around them. And then I just shared with you before this, it's kind of taken another fun turn, and I'm still working with our sales teams. But now, because of who we are as a company, we provide managed services to our customers as well as hardware, because we sell kind of managed service solutions and the hardware. We have a configuration center and warehouse. So the work that I'm doing within our own company is the very thing that we do for our customers, which is business optimization. So I'm working with our internal teams as well, having the same conversations. What things can we do to continue to optimize our business internally?
The only problem now is that you can't blame things on the vendor
Correct.
in this third role.
Me. I'm the problem now.
It's the good and bad of that. So that is a very interesting third dimension, and I do want to explore that. Let's go back to your time at DHL.
Yeah.
First of all, you just reminded me of one of the things that I just appreciated so much about the approach. I didn't know you when you were at DHL, but when you told me stories about that, talking about spending time, you know, on the warehouse floor. And it seems so obvious, but still so many leaders don't take the time to do that. And so I remember being impressed then and still now about taking the time to really understand a day in the life of the people, and why they would be asking the things that they're asking, right? Instead of just imposing change and technology on them, to actually put yourself in their shoes to the extent possible and really understand that. So I love that piece. What I'd really like to understand is, when you were rolling out technology to those frontline teams, after you had done the assessment, you had made decisions, you began the implementation. What did readiness actually look like to you? How did you figure out, like, what were the metrics that you were using to determine that you were ready to go live? And, when didn't that work so well? Tell me some stories around how that went.
Oh, I, you
All
know,
right, tell me one story then, maybe. I could see.
well, it's such an interesting because I that's probably something that that's a lesson learned that continues, right? Like I resisted saying like, when are you actually ready? I mean, I
Why
think
is that actually? I'm sorry to interrupt you, but why is that?
it's it's lack of. Um, I'm on the record. I'm on the record for saying this often. The Where I think a lot of these projects fall down, a lot of these initiatives fall down, is the number one thing that most people hate about these type of projects is the very front of the project, because it seems like it's a waste of time. And the reason I said I'm on the record for this is because most executives hate when I say this out loud. The planning phase of the project is, this is a hill I will die on. The planning phase of a project is the number one most important part of a project. And where you fall down from an implementation perspective, where you fall down from a go live perspective, is not understanding success criteria, not understanding what good looks like, not understanding variances. You and I talked about that a couple weeks ago. Like, where are the exceptions? Where are the pinch points that only a couple people know about that we have to account for? And frankly, and we can decide to go down this road or not. If we don't get better at the planning phase, this AI thing is going to take us down the same road. AI is not going to solve anything if we're not planful about collecting the data, understanding the data, and understanding the steps it will require for us to execute against that data, so that we can quickly shift the systems around the workflows that AI allows us to build out for our end users. And so I laughed because I'm like, it's that upfront piece. It all gets back to, you still have to sit down and collect kind of what it is that you're trying to accomplish. Um, and I have plenty of examples where I've not done a great job of that. All the way back to like rolling out a new GUI front end on a application when I worked at Nationwide Insurance, like my first project rollout. And I didn't know that the people in the call center didn't know how to use a mouse. Like, that's how far back. They
Yeah.
knew how to use keys on the keyboard. So they knew all the F keys. We rolled out a new GUI front end and took all the F keys away from them. And they literally, the day we rolled out, they were like, we can process 20 less orders an hour
Yeah.
because we don't know how to use, like, half of them didn't have a mouse. The other half didn't know how to use it. So we had to walk the rollout back and put the F keys back in. Like, that's my biggest example of, we missed.
But that's such a good example. I know now maybe some younger folks listening might say like they can't remember a day when there wasn't a mouse on every desk or
Right.
trackpad or something of sorts. But
Right.
I do remember I was alive during that transition of going from, kind of a CLI to a GUI now. And yeah, it's a pretty substantial change. But I think that lesson was probably helpful for you to learn early. That's an extreme situation. So then when you get into working like in the warehousing applications, or the applications that you were deploying into the warehouse, what did you take from that? Like, tell me about how you were kind of going through that process to look for those problems? Because I think, I guess the root of my question is, the users don't always know what is going to create that blind spot, right? And so
Mhm.
it's not as simple as just saying, well, what is it about this project that you don't expect to happen, right? Like, obviously, we can't just ask it like that. So, how did you go about that process of really learning, like, in that planning phase, what could go wrong, and how do we build in, into the plan, the remediation to make sure that things don't hit the fan?
Yeah. I mean, again, I think it's like it's the old five whys.
Hmm.
It's really spending the time digging into it. It's, when you've done a job all day long, every day, and somebody goes, tell me about the 5 steps that you're doing to complete that job. And you kind of rattle off and when you start taking a look at, and again, it's about being out there and asking the questions, you start taking a look at that job and it's like, well, why do you do it that way? Like, do you realize when you make that turn 5 times, you're wasting some 5 steps? Or the fact that you walk 25 steps to a printer to pick something up and walk back, we could put a printer on your hip and you could do the same thing. Sometimes it's very small things like the ordering of a screen, or a lot of things we've talked about as far as like on-screen trainings and things like that, where there's very small things that can be adjusted, but when you've been doing the work for so long, you're not even noticing that you're doing it anymore. And
Yes.
so having a different lens and a different set of people kind of simply saying to you, like, why do you do it like that? It's almost, you kind of mentioned like young people don't know about the mouse. Have you ever sat with a young person and they're like my kids don't use them like a physical mouse. They use a
Yep.
trackpad, and they'll look
Right.
at you and go like, "What? Why are you using a mouse?" It's almost that same thing. Like, you're looking
Yes.
at someone like, "Why are you?" Except not quite with the same judgment that like a 14-year-old or a 20-year-old give you, but like, why are you doing it like that? And then you're like, well, how could we do it differently? And then what if I told you? I just had this conversation the other day with somebody at Decision Point, and I said, if you didn't have to worry about how we implemented it, and you didn't have to worry about the cost, because I have the cost in my budget, and I have a responsibility to make sure it's implemented. And all you had to worry about was 2 weeks after it goes live, that your guys are not going to call you and complain about how much it sucks. What would your criteria be for making sure it was the perfect system? That's what I want you to worry about. If it doesn't get implemented right, you're going to call me and tell me that it's bad. And if the cost is too high, somebody else is going to call me and tell me that it's bad.
Yep.
But I want you to just focus on your end users having a good experience.
Have you
It
gotten that
won't,
answer back yet?
not yet,
Okay.
not yet, not yet. But I think it was freeing for me to have that conversation.
Yeah.
Is I just want you to focus on what your guys need to go out. We have field services in our organization. It's deeply important that their job, they have SLAs. It's deeply important that they go out and this system runs in a way that they can efficiently and effectively get in and out and service our customers. And so I'm like, if that's all you have to worry about, that's what I want you to come back to me with, and to make sure that we're tweaking this system so that does that for them.
Another leader in a field service business said something to me recently that I think you'll appreciate. He said, the problem isn't teaching them the new method, the new process.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is unwinding the muscle memory of how they've done it for all this time before.
Mm-hmm.
And that really resonated a lot with me for a couple of reasons. First of all, I have often pushed back as it relates to our platform and how we advocate for supporting change inside an organization, that we're actually not, I don't want to create muscle memory. That's not what we want. That's what you do for how to swing your golf club. I want people to really understand the business process, right? Not just remember steps, but I actually want them to understand what we're doing and why we're doing it. And so I've always kind of pushed away from trying to develop muscle memory.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's interesting when you flip that around to say that part of the reason why establishing new processes and getting compliance with new processes and procedures is not because of the new thing, it's because of being stuck in the old thing.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting because we've been around that all this time, but he just said it so succinctly that it really just struck a chord with me. And I do think that that's in a field service organization like you just described, when those guys are having a stressful day, they have a lot of work on their plate. Maybe the first visit of their day it took a little bit longer than they expected, but guess what? They still have the same number of, stops that they have to do for the rest of the day to close out their workday. And now they're time constrained on every subsequent step. And now we're saying, oh, by the way, and you have to be absorbing this new process and this new technology all at the same time. They're feeling a lot of pressure. And it's natural for any of us to go right back to their comfort zone of doing things the way that they did it before, right? The actual definition of muscle memory there.
Yeah.
And so figuring out how to unwind that, I think, is much a part of the challenge. And I love the question to your, I know it's an internal customer in this case, but that your internal collaborator on this project to say, what does that outcome look like? And I think it kind of speaks to then, I would be very surprised if your colleague doesn't come back now with more planning steps.
Mm-hmm.
Because now you've done a great job of kind of putting out the perspective into the future, saying, how do we eliminate chaos out in the future? And that's going to just naturally lead to more conversations around planning.
Right. Yeah. And again, same question I would ask a customer.
Right.
So if cost didn't matter, if implementation didn't matter, because, we as your partner will implement. I know that's who we are and what we do. We will get you there on cost because that's who we are and what we do. You tell me exactly, let us help you figure out as a solution provider what your customer needs. And, and that's, I argue, anybody should want to partner with a company that's executing and doing the same things inside of their business that they're selling to you. And so
Right.
I'm really proud of the work that we're doing because we're optimizing our business and making sure that we're running as efficiently and effectively as we can in order to provide that same level of service for our customers. So I'm asking the same questions of our team that I'm asking of our customers and that our business consultants are asking of our customers.
Practicing what you preach.
Yeah.
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 That's brilliant.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
So one thing that I'd really love to understand from your perspective, because I guess maybe sometimes I have to be careful about how I would pose this question to an actual customer that I'm trying to earn their business with.
Yeah.
But what I see happen often is that projects are running behind. That preparation period is getting compressed.
Mm-hmm.
And we still hold true to a delivery date
Mm-hmm.
despite the lack of preparation. And it continues to be a head scratcher for me as long as I've been serving large, complex companies,
Yeah.
where it's like, well, 6 months ago when we put this project plan in place, we said that it was going to take 4 weeks to prepare the workforce. Now, because of things beyond the workforce's control that we're serving here, that timeline has been compressed. But now we're still going to stick with our May 1st deployment date. Like, can you help me understand? Like, I know the kind of the surface level why, because somebody made a commitment that we were going to roll this thing out on May 1st. I kind of get that. But why do you think that what was necessary planning
Mm-hmm.
6 months or 12 months ago when we put that Gantt chart together now
Yeah.
becomes like optional?
Yeah.
How does that happen?
I mean, any project manager in the world will tell you, like, build the buffer into the plan before you start. I mean, it's, gosh, if I could answer this, I'd be a pretty rich woman. But I think it's lack of respect for the planning. And this is like, I
Mm-hmm.
can go all the way back to the very first project I ever managed 100 years ago. It's it's figuring out how to show the value in the planning phase of the project, like why it's so valuable to collect that data and why that part of the project, I would argue, expanding that part of the project as long as it needs to go actually provides you more value than the rest of it. But I think what happens is you get through that planning phase. The part that always takes the longest that everybody says they can get you through fast is getting funding.
Mm-hmm.
They'll be like, "Oh, I'll get the budget approved." It's a 2 week period, but you miss the capital funding meeting by one day, and then you can't make it until the meeting that's next month, and you make it jumped on the agenda or the meeting doesn't happen, and next thing you know, you're in a 4 or 8 week, kind of delay on getting the funding approved, and your date doesn't move. And so it's being able to provide kind of insight into losing that 8 weeks or 4 weeks or whatever it is. It's trying to figure out a way to show like the value of that 4 weeks and really what that means to the end users, and providing that back to like your training of your field team cannot be impacted by it. But the training and testing is what
Yes.
always gets shrunk down.
And I think that's actually the part that impacts the success in the field the most.
Yeah.
And that's the part that continues to be such a head scratcher for me, that we allow ourselves in many technical projects to get wrapped up in speeds and feeds and other technical things
Yeah.
that are important. We need to solve them too. I'm obviously not suggesting that we shouldn't, but for some reason we then downplay the need. We think like, okay, well we'll just train them harder and faster.
Right.
Like
Right. Yeah.
I don't even,
It doesn't work. Yeah.
it doesn't ever work. And so, but the piece that I don't understand fully is, if we know that, like, you and I can make some jokes about that now. We're not working on a project together right now, so
Right.
there's no real stress around this. We're kind of talking hypothetically. But in the real world, these are smart people that are making these decisions.
Mm-hmm.
And they know that they're probably going to experience some disruption to the business.
Mm-hmm.
And what I haven't figured out a way to do effectively yet is to help them understand how disruptive it's actually going to be
Mm-hmm.
when things don't go right,
Yeah.
and how much it's actually going to cost.
Yeah.
And so, what we do at Skillful, the number of times that we are working with a customer that's on the second round of a project
Mm-hmm.
is kind of telling. Many times we have met people the first time and they have downplayed the complexity of what they're about to do. And in some cases, we've come back in on the second time around and we help a customer implement with a new strategy. But I don't understand, like, would a week or two, if you delayed that project or a week or two when you were back working on the consumer side of this, would that have made that much of a difference negatively to say, hey, instead of rolling this out on May 1st, I'm going to advocate, I'm going to go put my head on the chopping block and say, I know I told leaders above me that we're going to do this on May 1st, but now I'm going to come back and say, no, it actually makes more sense to do it on the 15th because it'll cost less and be less disruptive. Yes, I'm going to own the 2-week delay,
Mm-hmm.
but this would actually be better for the people and
Mm-hmm.
ultimately for the business stakeholders.
Mm-hmm.
Am I asking for the impossible?
No, you're not. No, you're not. I think, well, I mean, it's human nature not to want to kind of have to go back and say that. Like, you get that. I do think, there has to be a way to say, I hate, again, I'll go on record. I hate pilots. I'm not a fan because I don't think, I think if you're going to do a pilot, you have to be very clear about what you're measuring and then measure it, and then be very honest about what you've measured and how it went. And I hate pilots because they usually don't get measured. And then when you come to the meeting and everybody goes, well, we measured it and it didn't go well. And everyone's like, well, okay, but we're still going to proceed. To me, that's where this goes wrong. This is where you get jammed up on the rollout schedule. If we're going to do a pilot and we're roll out, to me, a successful rollout is predicated on you get a handful of people that are going to be early adopters and they're going to give you their honest feedback. Whether it's, you got to be open to the good and the bad. Those are the ones you got to get your hands on. And you have to be willing to listen to them say, this is not going to go well for the following reasons. And then you've got to take that, you have to have the courage to take that back and say, like, we missed the mark. If I think back to we forgot to implement a mouse on people's PCs, it would have been a far easier conversation for me to have as a lowly project manager back then to a senior vice president of finance, it would have been easier for me to say, like, we need to order these $3 mice,
Yep.
we say that, for people's PCs than to literally stop and walk back a systems project and re-implement 6 weeks later. I mean, it was like one of my first projects. It was horrible. And I had to go sit in this guy's office. I was terrified. I was like, I'm losing my job. But it would have been a lot easier. And that was like my boss's feedback was like, we could have caught this. Like, how did we miss that these people didn't know how to do this? It's a big example, but you have to have the courage to kind of go back and have that conversation. And I just think it's hard. It's hard to be like, we've worked on this for 2 years and we're ready to implement and we think it's going to be the greatest thing and it's going to change the lives of the people that work for us. And then you have a couple of people. I mean, and I think it does start with the people that you pick with inside the retail store or the field services people or whoever. You have to pick the people who are going to go, this isn't great. And you have to provide them a safe space to do that. And that's not a town hall meeting or a culture meeting with 50 people on it. That's like a small daily stand up with 4 or 5 people, likely not somebody with an executive title, where they feel comfortable and safe saying, like, this didn't work the way that we thought it was going to, or we're losing time on this. And we need to make some adjustments. And then, a real leader, a servant leader is going to go have that hard conversation and look at their partner and go, hey, Justin, like, we believe in what you're doing, but you got to have our back. And as a partner, like, you've got to be kind of willing to go, make that case alongside of your partner at the company to say, like, this is a bad idea. But I don't know. I wish I knew the answer to why so many people are unwilling. They would rather have a missed implementation than to push a deadline out and do it like in a successful way.
That's the part that I find frustrating. And this is where just my deep empathy for the men and women on the front lines. I think, you and I have talked about this outside this conversation today,
Yeah.
that many times digital transformation happens to the frontline teams, right?
Yep.
Not with them, not for them, but to them.
Yeah.
And when we take a situation like what we're describing now, and we still impose that change on them, despite us not being ready,
Right.
the few that were on the project team, we had a couple of misses. Perhaps we should have a couple of uncomfortable conversations internally. But now our potential mismanagement or something that we just didn't see, a blind spot that we had, whatever the reason is, and how avoidable it was, now that imposes a bunch of discomfort on the people in the field. And those people in the field are the ones serving our customers.
Right.
So not only are we concerned about associate experience, but we should also be concerned about our customer experience, because they are the ones delivering, in many cases, directly to our customers. So imposing that change on them and making that disruptive to them, what you and I have talked about in the past, it's not only good for them just because they're humans and we should probably do a better job of taking obstacles away from their success, but it's also good for business, right? There's a metric there that our CX is going to go down as a result of this disruption. So could we have 1 or 2 uncomfortable conversations back at headquarters, reset our expectations, and then insulate, some of the folks in the field that are serving our customers, and insulate our customers from the downstream ripple effects, of that.
Yeah. Yeah.
I know it's easy for us to say and talk about on a podcast. I do recognize that. So for anybody that's listening and saying, Justin, you're being idealistic, I get it. But I am challenging some of that to just say, hey, 1 uncomfortable conversation might be better than 1,000 to your field techs in the field.
That's what, I wonder if it's like also getting, you talk about the customer experience. I talk a lot at Decision Point about how, like, my customer isn't just our end customer. Like, sales is my customer. Like, I kind of have this unique situation where my team kind of sits between sales, finance, and operations, and they're all my customer. But at the end of the day, sales is out executing, and they're driving an order through our system, and they're handing it to our operations team. And, there's an expectation that gets delivered, and I own enterprise systems, and it's part of my job to make sure those systems are established to push that order through, and the team has what they need from a process and data and controls perspective to get that order out to our end customer, right? No different from any of our customers. It's a curious thing of like, is it not just me going to the operations stakeholder and saying, this didn't it didn't go the way we thought it was going to go. We need a little bit more time. Is it also me going to the sales leaders or the other stakeholders on the project and saying, like, we all need to go have this conversation together,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because it's not just the front end users that are potentially having that impact, right? It's impacting everybody. That end user starts to see a gap in delivery within the supply chain, whoever the customer is, or the retail store. That affects everybody at the company. So being willing to kind of go, say to, the operator of the retail store, but also the finance team and the sales team, like, hey, we're having a problem here that is going to affect our customer experience, which is going to affect your ability to go sell, which is going to affect finance. Let's get the steering committee together. As the stakeholder, I really need your help to go have this conversation and say, let's slow down. That would probably help that. So now it's not like me and Justin going and saying, this isn't going well.
Yeah. No, I think what you just described should be the playbook, right?
Yeah.
I think, and part of it is I think we all that are involved in the project side, I think we have to do a better job of articulating the ripple effects of what's about to happen. It's
Mm-hmm.
not just about us meeting or not meeting a delivery target.
Right.
That's like the cause that we're trying to do. It's like, what's the effect downstream? And so do we get too focused on one result and then not pay attention enough to the unintended consequences of
Yeah.
that? And I think we have to do a better job of just calling that out. And then if as a team we make the decision still that, okay, we acknowledge that there's going to be some disruption. We understand that there may be a hit from a CX standpoint or all those other things, but given all of our options right now, we just decommissioned the other system, whatever the case may be. I understand there may be some extenuating circumstances. So we're going to have to move forward. I would say then another opportunity is to communicate that more transparently with the people that are going to be affected. And instead of putting our head in the sand and pretending like, hey, everything's going great, we're just going to go live on Monday according to plan, right?
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
should probably rethink how we're communicating that and saying, no, this is probably going to be a little difficult for the next couple of weeks. There were
Yep.
some unexpected things that came up in the project. We are very apologetic that you're going to feel it, but let's work together and try to minimize the impact, right?
Yeah. And yeah, like what's the plan to minimize that impact, right? I
Right.
mean, it's this idea of business transformation, I think, has largely, up until the last year or so, been thought of as like projects. I have a business transformation project. There's a start and there's an end. And when it's over, then I'll kick off another one. And, it's this concept now where it's a field, it's an area within inside of a company where it's kind of business transformation is ever flowing. It's much more agile. And, it's a great point. We're going to deliver this and it's not going to be perfect. And you're going to have pain points. And we know about a couple of those, and we're already starting to work on those right now. They're already on the roadmap. We're working through it. Um, Keep us posted if you see something else, but just know there's another release coming. We haven't stopped. There's more kind of pain points and pinch points that we're working on. I mean, that's really optimizing your business is kind of that continuous flow of looking at where the next, it's like the holes in the boat. It's this endless journey. There's never an end to optimizing your business. If there was, I don't know what, it's like, what does happy look like? At
Right.
the end, it's like, what am I going to do when everything is perfect and I'm happy? Like, your business is never fully going to be optimized, and everybody comes into work every day and they're like, wow, there's nothing for us to worry about. Everything's just humming along and it's perfect. But I think it's recognizing it and being very clear with people that they have input into what that looks like and shifting those priorities based on where the most pain is, and addressing those things kind of transparently.
Yeah. I talked to a senior leader recently. Your point just reminded me of this conversation, who was kind of making the argument that frontline adoption was a point in time problem in his organization. And he was really speaking to what you just said, which was the project approach, right? The project starts like, this project has been underway for a long time, but the launch phase is going to go from March 1st to June 30th or whatever, the dates are and stuff like that. So he was suggesting that this is a problem at a point in time. And then as the conversation unfolded, he went on to describe about 30 other times throughout the year that this is going to happen through a series of mergers and acquisitions and ERP changes and all these other things. And so it is a little bit interesting that this is happening all the time. And yet many organizations, super smart people, super sophisticated companies, still perceive this as very episodic,
Yeah.
rather than a capability that needs to be supported in the business. Like change, it needs to be a capability, not
Mhm.
just something that happens once in a while on the calendar when we have a project
Right.
plan, but it's
Right.
like, how do we actually support change, particularly with our frontline teams that are, by definition, in many cases, very distributed, very mobile, customer facing. Their time is being managed down to minutes in certain cases, right?
Right.
How productive are they? And then we're imposing change on them, and we don't really have like that muscle built up in our business to be able to support that change on a regular basis. And
Well,
it's an
and
interesting byproduct of like this project approach to doing
yeah,
things.
yeah. And while you're doing that, people are leaving and new people are coming in. So you're training them, it's the whole change in the tires while the cars your car could be going slow at this point. You could have gone through your heavy lifting of transformation,
Right.
but you're still making changes to that. But classically, these front workers, specifically with kind of a lot of this gig work that's coming along, where people are, kind of in and out of these jobs, you know, you're training people on these processes while your transformation is happening. So the
Right.
idea that it's a project with a start and an end, that for me, that theory falls apart the minute somebody quits and you have to hire somebody new, because
Yeah.
you're now training that person on the process and it's brand new for them, and you're kind of inserting them throughout.
Yeah. And this is why I think this needs to be not seen, this part of adoption of processes and systems needs to
Mhm.
be thought of as an overarching capability in the organization, because
Yeah,
it is higher level than any of the projects underneath it.
right.
And to your exact point, after the project is technically implemented and the project team transitions this solution over to a sustain phase, and now business ops is expected to kind of grab the baton and run with it, their problem actually doesn't go away, right? Because of what you just said. Many of these frontline roles have double digit turnover. And
Mhm.
so they're in this constant cycle of having to onboard people. And by the way, the system's probably not staying the same all the time. So there's
Right.
still being changes to workflows and processes, being put down. So it really is a capability that needs to be established that is supersedes, any of the individual projects. So I realize now I literally am still on my first question on my outline. Okay. I knew this was going to happen with you. I'm not really blaming it on you. I should say I knew this was going to happen with us.
Right.
But let me, so I want to go rewind back about 15 minutes. And I was
Okay.
asking you about kind of the readiness, like what does readiness look like in the field? And I was asking you that primarily from your role at DHL on kind of the customer
Right.
side. But I do want to flip that around now and say, and ask you your way of looking at that
Mhm.
as a solution provider and partner to your customers.
Mhm.
Do you see them walking into that same kind of readiness blind spot of going down the path into something where either in your gut or because you have objective data to show they're not as ready to go live as maybe they think that they are, but they're still running down the tracks as if they are?
Um, I think I think it depends. My least favorite answer. Um, I Timeline, I think, is a big part of it. Many times, you have customers who are kind of flying hot because they're starting up a new warehouse, starting up new stores, with a very specific timeline that they have to meet. So readiness is as fast as they have to deliver. The three, if you think 3PL specifically, where the whole project is kind of coming in hot. I do think classically though, readiness is always the we've got to go and we'll figure it out. I do.
Yeah.
The more I think about my answer, I can try to pretty this thing up and try to make it sound like everybody's like, yeah, we're good. We're all going to go home tonight at 6 o'clock, and tomorrow morning we're going to get up and we're going to go in and everything. No, it's not. Like 9 times out of 10, projects are coming in hot the first day of go live, and there are just it's just kind of part of a go live,
Yeah.
and you're going in with things you hadn't planned for, or things that potentially aren't ready to go. And I don't know that it's solvable.
Yeah.
I just think it goes back to kind of my variance and exception thing. Like I think anytime you kick one of these projects off, the number one, like it's a standard risk at the top of the project, is the
Yeah.
timeline is going to get shrunk. There are going to be things you didn't plan for. Leave it on the risk log as a high risk. And during go live, we have to hope that it's not something that we have to walk back, and it's something that we work through.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that makes sense. And I certainly don't come at that question from a position of, complete and total idealism that, we can seek a goal of being 100% ready, and
Yeah.
no way in the world should we go live on Monday if we're not at exactly 100%. I don't think that that's realistic. In fact, most of the experiences that I've had at Skillful, customers have chosen a percentage readiness that they would deem acceptable.
Yeah.
And we do our best to work with them to measure that. And whether a company is using Skillful or not using Skillful, I'd advocate for having some mechanism to do this in place, and then choose what is that percentage, right? It probably shouldn't be 30%,
Yeah.
but it also doesn't need to be 100%. But, something greater than 75 probably feels about right. 75%, 85%, right? And having some objective ways to measure that readiness to hopefully root out some of the, hey, our people didn't even have a mouse kind of situations, right?
Right.
Like those types of things.
That one hurt,
Um,
Justin. Thank you for that.
I'm sorry, you kind of teed it up. I
I
was
did.
just using an example from you. Um, but but seriously, to avoid some of those things. And then another piece of this that I'd love to get your take on is confidence from the field.
Mhm.
This has actually come up a lot in my day job lately, and I've been actually very excited to hear customers asking more about this. And that is, we often talk about competence, that
Mhm.
our people know how to do something. When we talk about people and process and technology and the integration of all those things together, we talk about the how. The fact that confidence is coming up a lot, I think, is actually an important thing, because I think it's something that there is not a confidence measurement on a Gantt chart, you know, and yet it actually may be one of the most important things to successful adoption of new process and change. And I'm curious about your take on that.
I mean, it's the most important thing, right? I hadn't thought through it, but it users' confidence in the system and the technology doing what we're telling them that it's going to do. It's it's the most important
Yeah.
measurement to success of the yeah. I mean, it's funny. It should be so obvious, and somehow it it hasn't been. But yeah, I mean, it's kind of like what I was saying the other day, to the manager. It's like your guys need to be happy with this, which effectively, I guess, is what I was saying. Yeah, I mean, it should be one of the core measurements of the go no go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it speaks to these customers that have brought this up lately for us, I think it speaks to, first of all, their deep connection with the
Mhm.
men and women on the front lines. They're not having these observations from a conference room.
Right.
They're having these observations from being out in the field, right? They are deeply connected with the people side of change.
Yeah.
And so I think that's good. And then they are seeing how much that's impacting the change, right? It's essentially someone's confidence might be the leading indicator to their likelihood to unwind the muscle memory from the past.
So good.
I
Yeah.
think actually a leader that I was speaking with recently was talking about the fact that some of the problems that like you and I discussed today are because leaders have muscle memory too. And so they just go back, they fall back to the ways that they've done things before.
Yep.
And I thought that was a really interesting point because I wrongly tend to be so focused on the frontline team members that I forget there's other humans in the mix that we have to cater,
Yeah.
and myself included. I have some. I guess I could be stubborn in certain ways too, or have some muscle memory in some areas. And so,
Yeah.
building confidence that I can do this new thing when I'm being measured by time,
Mhm.
by my outcome, by the number of packages I ship, by the number of barcodes I scan, by the number of deliveries I do or service visits that I do today. I think that's when things kind of fall back to the way I used to do it before is I'm feeling all of that pressure and I don't have the confidence in the new mechanism.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and that's, it's interesting because even, when you talk about, like the confidence and the shrinking of kind of the technology divide, right? Like I do think there's a higher tolerance when you're handing a device to somebody who's using a device every day. It's amazing when you go out on the floor and you see some of the workers, their ability to figure it out, you
Yes.
know, where I'm like, nope, I need all the instructions and all the things. Tell me exactly what I need to do. I'm good. But I am very black and white in that. And when many times when we drive these business processes and you kind of or hand an application over to somebody and they're kind of able to maneuver their way through it, and you're like, okay, so we need to write a new SOP document or we need to kind of build out new instructions. They're like, nope, I worked through it, we're good. That's the muscle memory part. Is like for me, I'm like, well, I used to have to write 15-page training documents or put a video out there so people could go look at it. And the fact is, they're not going to leave the floor, go to a laptop and watch a video. They're going to stand there and figure it out or work with somebody that they're working with to figure it out. So, how can we, where is good enough good enough? How can we build this thing so that whatever's running on, the device that they're using, they can get through it and can continue to process kind of within that fenced in an area so that they can be as productive as they can be. And then they're like, thumbs up, we're ready to go. And
Yeah.
that's the confidence piece, right? It's the confidence thing is interesting because it's almost like that's a scoring. I'm gonna like email you in a week and be like I've been walking my dog for a week thinking about this confidence thing. It's very interesting because it's everybody's kind of thought around that will be a little bit different because you could have one employee who's like, yeah, I think it's great, 100% confident I can use this. Somebody else might be 60, but that doesn't mean they're saying not to go.
Yeah.
They may be, it's almost like change management, right? Somebody could
It
be
is.
good at 60%.
Well, and I would also add that just because somebody is confident doesn't mean that they are competent. Their confidence could be misplaced.
True.
And I've seen that too. I've
Yeah.
seen examples of people that don't think that they need to bother with the training and they dismiss it. And then, they are confident. They're not worried about it at all, but it doesn't mean that they're going to be compliant with this new
Yeah.
process and change. Right.
Yeah.
And I think that's the challenge that we have is we need to continue to do a better job of, measuring
Hmm.
the expectations that we have and giving them a place to develop the confidence and competence that they need and
Yeah.
whatever mechanism that is. And yes, I obviously everybody that knows I have, I have some ways that we implement this at our company, but I'm just advocating for figure it out in some way, shape, or form. Whether you use a platform like ours or you don't use a platform and you have a spreadsheet to kind of do some sort of assessment, either way, you should be doing this.
Yeah.
And then how you go about doing that, might be subject to different ideas and different companies and stuff. But I do think we need to do a better job of that. I think that's one of the things just to share. I actually want to finish up with a question for you because we're already at the end of our time here, but I want to ask a question to you about you as a service provider. But I also want to share an insight from my company that has been, it's going to sound a little bit corny. It's like, it is definitely a warm, fuzzy thing that goes beyond, but it was an unintended consequence of building out this platform. I was really trying to serve people like you at Decision Point and you at DHL. I was thinking of you as my stakeholders to build. Our customers take Skillful out and survey their users all the time. And the feedback that we get from users is like mind-boggling. They often talk about things like consequences and risk and fear and anxiety. Like all these other words that they put into free text fields, like these aren't drop downs. We're not saying, did you feel anxious today? We're giving them, a free text field, and they are putting those words in when being surveyed about how these digital transformation projects feel to them.
Interesting.
And that is really something for all of us to think about.
Yeah.
And it goes back to phrasing. And I sometimes I even think on conversations like the one you and I are having right now, we can kind of joke about it and we say, oh, digital transformation is done to the people in the field. And, we can kind of talk about that. But like, there's actually a human being on the other side of that thing that's very much feeling like it's being done to them.
Yes.
Right. And so, okay. So maybe some people aren't super sensitive to those people, and maybe they just say, hey, they got to suck it up and do their job. And this comes up a lot on the podcast. But what I would argue is if all of us that are concerned about our business objectives recognize that our path to success is through those people, then we need to consider that, right? Yes. Whether we want to or not, we need to consider how they're feeling. And that is a little bit about the ergonomics. And again, picking on you with the mouse, trackpad, touchscreen, like all those other things. There are definitely ergonomic things that we need to be considering. But I also think that there's some psychology things. And I'm really not, I have no education in that area other than just a bunch of anecdotes from the field to see how people respond to that stuff. And it's really thought provoking to just think how we can get just a little bit closer to truly putting ourselves in their shoes. So okay, that's my rant about that topic. We do need to wrap this up because we were going way over as I figured was going to happen. I want to give you an opportunity. I've known about Decision Point Technologies and some of the previous companies that have come together to form what is now known as Decision Point Technologies. And I'm so excited for you to be a leader in that business and having both the perspective from the customer side and now on the provider side serving clients. And I just want to give you a chance to like promote what's the best advice that you have for your customers sitting in the seat that you have today that is derived from having sat in the seat that your customers are sitting in today. They're working with vendors, they're seeking out a vendor partner to work with on important issues. What's an insight or a piece of advice that you have to offer them that comes from that experience that you had in the past?
Yeah, I mean, I think my biggest piece of advice is to look at a full solution. That there's this kind of bloated use of business transformation and roadmaps and kind of all the other and there's AI and RFID and all the kind of things that go in the roadmap. I'm really proud of the work that our commercialization teams have done around. We have really good business consultants that we brought into the company. And these are people who aren't going to talk to you about speeds and feeds and widgets and things. They're going to talk to you about exactly what you and I just spent time talking about. What business issues are you having? Where are you having problems? Where are you having visibility gaps and training issues? And where are your end users having pain? And that team comes back and sits in a room and they'll put together kind of where you're at today, where we believe you should get. And we build like pathways to get there. So it's showing ROI from current state all the way through. So, I kind of joke around, you don't want to go from a post-it note to a full RFID solution. It would be irresponsible as a company for us to say, well, great, you're using post-it notes. Here's a $20 million RFID project, and we promise you it's going to solve your problems.
Yeah.
There's no CFO in the world that's going to approve that. But if I can say to you, let's go from post-it notes to handheld scanners, and then we're going to train your staff using our software partners, and then and we can start showing you real ability to have ROI and productivity gains through the partners that we have, whether they're software, hardware providers. We can start walking you kind of left to right through that transformation, and we want to be that partner. We offer full managed services, so we can also come out in the field and service. We can also do repair and replace. And so the ability to kind of wrap ourselves around your business and provide that partnership, that's really like what I'm the most proud of, where we've gone as collecting these businesses together. To your point, significant merger and acquisition over the last couple of years. We have managed mobility services that we layered in last year. And so personally, I'm doing the integration. So I'm proud of the fact that we have actually integrated these companies together. So we are doing a single solution offering. So when you come and work with us, you're working with a single company. These offerings all work together in single systems. So when you call our service desk, it's one group of people. We're responding as a single group of people. I just gave the example of field services. So we're sending them out in trucks and they're using our systems. And so we're just really proud of wrapping a single group of people around our customers and being kind of that, single back to pat, not throat to choke.
Not throat to choke.
Yeah. And so those business consultants are so important to us. We all kind of walk around with the 5 or 7 questions in our pocket, and we're always selling, but we're also always asking questions when we see people out, like, what is your experience with your technology? How can we make it better? And taking that back to our internal teams and having those conversations.
It's my favorite part of doing the types of things that we do and the types of things that you do is kind of getting to see behind the scenes of the global economy.
Yeah.
And I just have insatiable curiosity to just learn more about how companies operate. And of course, I have a problem solving mindset. I just want to go try to look for some ways to solve those problems too. But I'm always just fascinated about just the diversity and even companies in the same industries that may be doing the same things with their customers, but they go about it in completely different ways. Like I love that. And so I think the business consultants that you've brought in to really help explore the nuances of each business and let that be the lead rather than the technology, leading with the speeds and feeds. That should be the how, but not the why, right? Yeah. So that's awesome.
Yeah.
Very good. Keri, thank you so much for taking the time today. We're going to have to do this again because I do. In fact, maybe next time we will just have a whole show dedicated to the idea of frontline confidence. We'll talk about the distinction between competence and confidence.
I love it. Yeah, let's do it. And we can do it sooner. We don't have to wait another 2 years.
I think that's a great idea. Keri, thanks so much for being on the show.
Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to Frontline Innovators. If you enjoyed today's conversation, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss future episodes. And remember, when we put people at the center of digital transformation, frontline workers thrive and organizations succeed. This podcast is brought to you by Skillful, helping frontline teams adopt the technology they need to work smarter, safer, and with confidence.